There was a lecture that was sent round and it was called Whiteness, a Problem for Our Time.
Oh, don't. That does sound quite Mein Kampfy.
This sounds kind of racist. It was all stuff about how the media was racist to Meghan Markle. White people are responsible for all the problems in the world.
She said that?
Even white children are racist. And I was like, what has this got to do with psychology and psychotherapy? And I was told to stop speaking. And I did. They were raising a student conduct policy against me. I'd created a traumatising environment for the other students.
You've traumatised them.
She decided that it wasn't safe for people to be in a room with me. I got these phone calls that when I answered, there's just somebody breathing down the line.
This is mad. I didn't expect this turn of events. Baby Reindeer.
Yeah, but this had happened after HR had told her not to contact me. I was terrified. And actually, it became more and more hysterical as it went on. The walls started closing in on me so quickly. I was like, whoa, oh my God, that the lunatics are in charge of the asylum.
So you were a psychotherapist at the Tavistock Clinic, infamous for the transgender ideology, but other things as well. Did you see that Tavistock Clinic becoming ideologically captured?
So my background is in nursing. I was a mental health nurse and I did 2 years of training at the Tavistock and I graduated with a postgraduate diploma. And when I was there for the first 2 years, it was kind of okay. I was aware of the gender identity clinic, but it was kind of separate from my training and it seemed almost like diametrically opposed to what I was doing because we were all about talking, whereas the gender identity was all about like changing the body and medicine. So I sort of thought, well, that's a kind of weird kind of separate thing from what I'm doing. So I was kind of happy. And then I did my first 2 years. And then when I returned for the second 2 years, very quickly, that's when I saw that the whole thing had been captured and ideology had taken over essentially. So straight away, it was kind of ideology from the get-go. And I was quite surprised how quickly that had happened.
Wow.
Yeah. Do you want me to go into it? Because it's a big, long kind of story that I have about what happened.
Yeah, do. I mean, so was it like you came back after the initial 2 years, it was a bit more normal, and it was almost like one of these movies where everybody had been replaced with like grey masks of I don't know, what are they called, apparatchiks? Is that the right word, apparatchik?
Yeah, it was kind of like that. How it started was that there was a lecture. I started in September in the academic year, and there was a lecture on race and racism. And I was kind of like, that's quite soon to have a lecture about that sort of thing. And I'm aware that this is around this kind of just after Black Lives Matter movement and you know, George Floyd and everything. So I was aware that it was a highly political subject. But I was kind of like open to it because I was like, well, there is kind of lots of psychology around race and racism and, you know, I'm kind of interested in that. So, you know, whatever. And then when I went to the lecture, it was just all politics. There was no kind of psychology. It was all kind of about the Black Lives Matter movement and it was really one-sided. And they weren't even like bringing in evidence of any kind. So, and then one of the lecturers, she kept sort of linking racism to Christianity, and I'm a Christian. So, like when it got to the end of the lecture, I just politely asked, because I was thinking this lecture is so imbalanced and it's so political, and why am I paying to kind of be taught politics when I'm here to do psychotherapy? I sort of said, I noticed that you've, you know, related racism to Christianity on several occasions. I'm curious as to why you've sort of singled out that one religion. You know, and I sort of thought that was quite a sort of, you know, an okay question. I didn't accuse her. I was just curious. I was expressing curiosity. And she doubled down. She said, well, Christianity is responsible for racism because it's European. And I was just like, what the hell's going on? She did, and I said to her, you know, I'm a Christian. And she didn't apologize. She didn't seem kind of open to debate. And what I noticed, because this was on a Zoom call when it was during COVID, so we were doing everything online. And I noticed that all the sort of people on the Zoom call were sort of like in agreement with her, and they were like outraged that I'd even asked a question.
How could you see that? Was it like
on the looks? It was like all the looks sort of totally changed. Like, what is this? And
furrowed brows.
Yeah. And even the sort of the other supervisors and the course lead who was on the Zoom call, it was suddenly like, what am I doing? Why is she asking this? And I was like, well, hang on a minute, we've just sat through like a kind of piece of propaganda for like over half an hour. It was all stuff about how the media was racist to Meghan Markle, how this so-and-so person was racist. And I was like, what has this got to do with psychology and psychotherapy? There's no evidence here. So that happened. And I suddenly felt like, okay, what's going on here? Because The way they reacted wasn't normal, because I sort of thought, I had to sort of doubt, I sort of thought, hang on, what did I just say? Was it okay? And I thought, no, it was okay. It was just a question. So that happened. And then not long after that, there was a lecture that was sent round to all the students. It was celebrating the sort of 100th anniversary of the Tavistock. And it was called Whiteness, A Problem for Our Time.
Oh, don't. A problem for our time.
Yeah.
It sounds like, that does sound quite Mein Kampfy.
It's like, I was like, okay, this sounds kind of racist, right? I was thinking, if it was any other race, if it was like Jewishness, a problem for our time, I was like, whoa, what is this? I was like, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, because, I watched it, and it was an hour of critical race theory. Totally, it was unbelievable. There was no kind of other side to the debate. So that the lecturer, Helen Morgan, was saying things like, white people are responsible for all the problems in the world.
She said that.
Yeah, she was saying white people. She was saying white privilege like it was a fact. She was saying things like all white people are racist. Essentially, even white children are racist, and we need to be aware of children's race.
Children's racism.
And it wasn't what I was concerned with. I'm quite an open-minded person, right? So if somebody has a different politics to me, I've worked with lots of patients that disagree with me on all sorts of things. I'm open to that. But I guess what really worried me is that it wasn't saying there is this thing called critical race theory. It's a theory. This is what it says. And you can agree with it on this line, or you can disagree with it. And here's people's opposition to it. It was presenting it as a fact. And actually, it became more and more hysterical as it went on. So towards the end of the lecture, when there was Q&As, people were becoming tearful about the fact that they'd taken the colourblind approach, and how awful that was, to that they needed to be aware that there are differences. And I was like, I sort of had this moment where I thought, oh my God, that the lunatics are in charge of the asylum. I just thought, if you get one bad egg, you sort of think, okay, I get it, this person's a bit dodgy. But it was like everyone on this Zoom call, nobody was questioning it. Nobody was sort of saying, oh, are there any downsides to this theory? Or, is there any, what's your evidence for that? It was just, ideology, dogma all the way through. And as I said, it was extremely racist. I'm crowdfunding for my legal case. And if you go onto my crowdfund, I've got a video that shows excerpts of things that were said in this lecture.
Oh, wow.
So people can watch it. It's quite shocking that it's,
wow.
Yeah. So it's out there, and they've still got it up on YouTube. You can still watch it. It's like they're proud of it. Even on their website, they were saying, we take the critical race theory approach to race. They weren't, they're quite open about that. So when I had this lecture come through, in correspondence with the other lecture I'd seen where they were saying Christianity is racist, I just thought, this is crazy, what's going on? So I wrote a complaint to the complaints department and just put things that they said, and we're just saying, look, this is racist towards white people. You're saying white people don't understand the world. You're making loads of generalizations about a group of people based on their skin color, and that's what racism is, So I'm quite concerned about this. So, yeah, and I also wrote an email to the course lead saying, while you may be a critical race theorist, while people may think in this way, there are other views. So some people find these ideas offensive. So white people find it offensive, but also Black and ethnic minorities find it offensive, because there's a narrative in critical race theory that essentially presents all Black people as victims. And the whole thread line is that you can sort of know what's going on in a person's mind based on their skin color. So if I have a Black patient, I'm to assume that they sort of view me as a threat because I'm white, or they view me as having power over them. And I was like, well, they might not. I don't know that. So yeah, I wrote a complaint, and I wrote an email to some of the students and to the course lead saying, there are other views, and we need to be aware of that, because our patients might not agree with these ideas. And I thought that was pretty kind of okay, because I just thought it was so wrong what they was doing. And I got pulled into a meeting with the course lead straight away, and I was told, from the get-go, that because of my views, that the course might not be right for me. And I was like, hang on a minute. All I've said is that there's different viewpoints. I've not said anything. Yeah. So
How far-reaching is, because Tavistock, is this the NHS?
It's the NHS.
This will be, we can assume this is like nationwide.
Yeah. So this is an NHS training. So the outcome of this would be that you would work in the NHS.
And you're not fit to work in the NHS because you're open to disparate views.
Different ideas, like because I was disagreeing with racism. And I said, well, look, I think racism's a really important thing to think about. I said, my view of not being racist is not judging a person by the colour of their skin, not being prejudiced, treating everyone equally. I said, I take the sort of colour, what's known as the colourblind approach. And she said, essentially here at the Tavistock, that we see that now as discredited. And I was like, whoa. And I said, this lecture, Whiteness, a problem for our time, is that just the view of this lecturer, or is that the view of the whole trust? And she said, that would be the trust's view. And I was, at that point, I was like, where do I go from here? This is crazy. So as I said, I wrote a complaint, and initially they took the complaint quite seriously, and they were like, we're going to look into it. So I was thinking that's really good. And they did this long investigation. They met with me, and I explained, my view of. I said that I take the colourblind approach, and why I just quoted this lecturer and said this is racist because it's a generalisation about a race. And they met with the person who said it, and so on. And at the end of this investigation, I got a letter, an investigation report sent to me, and it basically said that I was the problem, that they encourage all their students to interrogate whiteness, and that I need to find a safe space in which to interrogate whiteness. And the fact that I was showing opposition to these ideas showed that there was kind of a lack of my ability to learn. So there's something wrong in my learning.
Oh, very 1984, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to learn and be re-educated.
Did
you feel in these moments, because we all know that feeling just if you're arguing with a friend, right?
Yeah.
Someone says something that you're like, what? And that's a horrible feeling, like, gosh, oh no, I didn't mean. Did you feel like the world was like falling in on you?
It was so strange because, like I said, I was only saying that there are different opinions, and we might work with people that don't agree with this. And I personally don't agree with it, but in the NHS, we will see patients that don't agree with this. And I explained why I thought it was wrong. And I sort of thought, how can they disagree with that? Because I'm pretty being open-minded. Like, I don't mind if the lecturer that teaches me is in their spare time a critical race theorist or communist or whatever. They can believe what they believe, but I'm just saying we need to have an openness. And the fact that so quickly it became, like you said, the walls started closing in on me so quickly. I was like, whoa. Was
there panic when you sort of read these emails?
Yeah, I was panicking a little bit, but I was thinking, hang on, I've kind of got the law on my side here a little bit, because it seems to me like they're breaching the Equality Act. I wasn't even sure at that point. And I was thinking, look, I surely haven't said anything wrong. There's nothing that they could pull out that would be wrong. So I was just kind of curious to see, as I thought that maybe these few lecturers I'd encountered had sort of gone rogue a bit, and I was expecting the institution to be like, no, of course you can have a different opinion, and I thought that would be it. And I thought it's so important to speak out so that people know. But that was not the case. It was very quickly I was in the wrong. And and it kept happening. So they kept sending reading material through to us it was the writings of DiAngelo.
Yeah, gosh.
Yeah,
who I think has become. It's so hard to know whether people like you and I, people like you and me, and people who are listening to the podcast have over the years moved further and further into a space that is not real life. I don't know. Have we been audience captured, or has it become more and more evident across the population that DiAngelo is just an utter fraud, and that all of these things are utterly ridiculous? And I don't know. Do you know?
It is strange because she's just had a cameo in the recent Matt Walsh film where she's totally kind of embarrassed and shown up to be what she is. I think there's more and more people who are sort of seeing that she's a fraud, but then at the same time, it seems like anti-white racism or critical race theory is getting worse because it's becoming more prevalent in schools. Like the Labour Party are pushing it more and more. So you see it kind of, both sides are getting stronger, but they're equally opposed. So yeah, at the Tavistock, it was as though DiAngelo's ideas were gospel. It was like, she's the authority on race. And I was like, well, she's not a clinical psychologist. Her ideas aren't evidence-based. Why are we going to this person? It was almost had a religious feel to it. So they kept sending her reading material through, and it was saying like overtly racist things. And I just thought, okay, I'll just ignore it. I won't say anything. And then we had like a review of the term seminar where I was asked by the lead of the course if there'd been anything that had annoyed me on the course or anything I disliked. And I said, well, actually, yeah, this recent reading material from DiAngelo, I've already flagged up that, there's racism on this course. And you're sending me through her work again, and I don't agree with it. And I don't think we should be going to this person for ideas on race. And I just explained that, again, as I said to you, that it wasn't evidence-based and so on. And I was told to stop speaking, and I did. And then the day after that, I got an email through from the course lead saying that they were raising a student conduct policy against me, which is the first stages of like removing someone from the course.
Wow. So that must have hurt, because this is your life.
Yeah, I was terrified. So I'd been, I come from quite a working class background. I'd been working as a nurse for a long time, saving up to do this training, like to be a psychotherapist. I'd done really well in my first 2 years. My work with patients was going well. And I was just thinking, oh my God, how could somebody do this to me? In the body of the email, she wrote to me, she said that I lacked maturity, that I'd been vexatious in the way I spoke to her, that was inappropriate, and that I'd created a traumatizing environment for the other students. So
you've traumatized them.
Yeah.
They're traumatized now.
But because I disagreed with the...
Oh man. I gave a talk yesterday at the How the Light Gets In festival about the changing attitudes and the things that we used to find offensive, which were based more on religion before because the society was different, or based on the bodily fuck and shit and those kinds of things. And now it's identity, and it's arbitrary, really. It'll be something else in 30 years. And I gave a whole half an hour talk about, they might be right about some things. And I was really nice and trying to say, I understand your opinions, but you have to realize that we can never know we're right, even when we think we're being very progressive and for equality and all of those things. And the questions after in the Q&A were so hostile. And
really?
One woman, and just she put her hand up and she said, right, but all those things you said before, those were horrible racist things, whereas we are going for equality and progressiveness. And I went, have you listened? I didn't say this, but I said, have you listened to anything I said? Of course you think that, because we're in the moment now where we're doing the thing that you think is the thing.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was like. I was thinking, I was literally almost like writing down what I'd said and being like, no, there's no conceivable way that could be inferred as being like immoral or racist. I was like, that's a completely normal thing to say. So they raised this student conduct policy against me, and their own policies and procedures lay out that they need to meet with me, hear my side of the story. There needs to be a whole kind of process that happens. They didn't do any of that. So they just skipped their own policies and procedures. And it was about 6 weeks after I had that student conduct policy raised against me, I had a letter just sent to my house saying that if I continued to speak inappropriately about race, it could impact my continuation on the course, and it may affect my ability to enter the profession of psychotherapy.
Wow.
And
I've heard your case be described as a struggle session. So for those who don't know the history, what is a struggle session? A struggle session is
something that happened in the Cultural Revolution and in Maoist China, where it's kind of like a psychological tool to continually put pressure on people to admit to crimes that they haven't done. That you have to you undergo all this pressure that you assume that you have to intake that there's something wrong with you, that it can't be the culture or the politics or the society, that it's you. And that's done over like long periods of time, and it's done through like shaming and kind of making you turn against your friends and your family and all that sort of thing. And it did start to feel, I don't want to be hyperbolic, I don't want to be, but it did start to feel like, hang on, this whole institution is kind of trying to make me feel like I'm an awful, terrible person, and I'm really not. I've not done anything. I was having progress reports come through, and I was doing well with my patients, and they were writing things in the body of the email. In one of them, it sort of said, we've realised that your views aren't in keeping with our anti-racist thinking, and you need to learn more about diversity. And I was just thinking, okay, if you're saying I don't have sufficient anti-racist thinking, then you're accusing me of being a racist, basically.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Because
the whole time you've been speaking, I've been thinking, I'm angry and I'm feeling like I want to sort of take you and go, right, is this your racist? Is this your far right racist? Is Amy your Hitler of today? And if that's right, if that's what you think, then maybe you're the bad guys.
Because they have this, the whole point of critical race theory, it's extremely black and white. You're either with them or against them. So if you don't adopt all of their so-called anti-racist thinking, then it would imply that you're a racist, because to not be anti-racist would mean that you're a racist. And I was like, well, no, I have a different approach to racism than you. That doesn't mean that I'm a racist. So they just doubled down in this investigation report, and they said that I was the problem, and they raised the student conduct policy against me. And then as I went into the second year, I was sort of thinking, they even said, I questioned this report, and I said, well, you've said that I've got an inappropriate view on racism, and I said, can you tell me what it was that I said? They could never tell me what I said. They kind of changed it. They said, it was the tone in which you said
the tone.
So and
they were emails, a lot of them, weren't they?
Yeah, emails, and some of them like during the complaints procedures, like I met with certain people and they were saying, well, we've heard the tone in which you said this was inappropriate. And I was like, well, what, I didn't swear, I didn't raise my voice. Can you say more about that, because I'm going to need to know going forward what is an inappropriate tone. And they were like, that's just our judgment.
Well, I wonder if there's a case of they sort of they've made their decision already of pushing back against you because it felt like they're supposed to do it, because they feel so self-righteous in what they're doing. And then it gets to a point, I wonder what that feels like, where somebody like you're going, well, what is the problem? What is it? And they have to just close down because they can't go back, because then they'd have to apologize.
I know.
And it might not look good for them. So they've just got to keep going at you.
Yeah, I was thinking, because they're, psychologists and psychotherapists, there would be someone at some point along the kind of hierarchy of the institution that would be able to be self-reflective and be like, okay, maybe let's stop, and it just didn't happen. The whole way through, it doubled down. So when I entered the second year, I was kind of thinking that, if I speak in the wrong tone, I could be removed from the course. So how the hell am I gonna, I was thinking that this is gonna go badly. So that's when I kind of got in contact with some lawyers and was saying, I'm in a bit of a mess now, I need some help. And it seems as though they're gonna push me off the course. And they just, into the second year, they just continued with all of this diversity stuff. I put a small piece about what the discrimination I'd experienced in the papers to try and raise some money for my legal case, because I needed money to pay the lawyers that had given me advice, and I got several £1,000s from that. So I was, but then the fact that I was in the news, I sort of thought that they would see that I was taking legal action and they would back down, but they didn't. They just continued. So I had one of the first lecturer that did the race and racism lecture that said that Christianity is a racist religion. She contacted the Nursing and Midwifery Council, which is the kind of regulatory body of my nursing, separate from my training, totally separate. That was my employment. And she basically said that I was unfit to work with diverse patients, that I had shown a lack of knowledge about slavery. That had never come up. I don't even know what she was going on about.
Slavery,
like the transatlantic slave trade. And I was like, how do you know what I know or don't know?
These are children.
Yeah,
these are children just going blood, just throwing stuff at you.
Yeah, and she said all sorts of things. She said I potentially caused a hate crime incident, and just all of this stuff. It was like this kind of bile that just came out, and I was like,
"Did you cause a hate crime incident?"
No, but because I'd spoken about what happened to me in the media, she was saying that itself was a hate crime, and I was like, no, I'm just saying what you've said. Like I was literally just quoting them, like I can quote them from their documents. So they were trying to. So there had to be an investigation within the Nursing Midwifery Council as to whether I was a kind of a racist. That went on for months, so that was extremely stressful because it was my livelihood.
And it's the worst thing, apart from the Jimmy Savile kind of stuff. It's the worst thing you can be accused of.
Yeah, it's awful because I've been nursing in London for years, and I've obviously worked with loads of Asian and Black patients. I've had really good strong relationships with patients and staff, and it was quite it was hurtful. It was really horrible because they had to go to my employer where I was working as a nurse, and they had to ask the management if they'd had any complaints about me. And, it was just really horrible to thinking everybody's now sort of looking for evidence of whether I'm a racist or not. Luckily there hadn't been, but it was just so awful. So that was all going, I should say, thankfully, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, at the end of a long kind of investigation process, they said that basically nurses are allowed to have their own opinion. They're allowed to disagree with critical race theory, and that was the end of it. So I was kind of quite pleased with that. But at the Tavistock, that it just got worse and worse. So when it became clear that I was bringing legal action against them, as I said, I thought that they would back down, but that just made them angrier, and it became as though they were more convinced that they were right. So, the lead of the course started. She actually, on one occasion, because we've been doing our meetings on Zoom. We were about to meet in person because of COVID. We were now able to meet in person because COVID was over. This is how long ago it was. She gave a speech to the students in front of me. This was on a Zoom course, saying we were going to meet in person, but she had decided that because of my oppressive speech, and because of my views on white privilege, this is exactly what she said, and it was a pre-written speech, she was reading it aloud, because of my views on white privilege and because of my oppressive speech, she decided that it wasn't safe for people to be in a room with me, basically, and that my oppressive speech would be better managed over Zoom, and therefore that's why we were continuing to meet over Zoom. Yeah,
that must have been really painful.
That it was. It was painful. It was shocking. I was at that point. I was just sort of thinking, "Am I going mad?" My health had really declined at that point. I was under a lot of stress anyway. And to think that someone would do that, and it was obviously done maliciously, because she didn't sort of have a word with me beforehand and sort of say, as you would expect a professional to deal with something like that. If there'd been concerns about me, you'd think she'd pull me to the side and sort of say, maybe, for the benefit of everyone, maybe don't talk about it. But she didn't do that. She did it to humiliate me. She didn't do it in a sort of a way to find a kind of solution. It was just to humiliate me in front of the other students.
Oh my God. How many students were in this course?
Yeah, it was a small course. So sometimes we had seminars and lectures where there was about sort of 15 people. In this particular supervision group where she gave this speech, there was 5 of us, something like that. But basically I was being told not to speak. And yeah, I was just, still now, I'm still kind of, I've tried to get my head around all of it, and I can understand all the intellectual arguments of why people are like this and everything, but I still feel, and I understand that people are getting cancelled more and more, but I still feel like I can't fully understand it. And that's why it kind of bugs me, because I just don't know how they can get to that point. As a professional, you're the lead of a course on a university. How can you think that writing a kind of malicious speech about a person that is suing the institution, and has made several complaints, and was all said to the institution that it's affecting your health, how can you think that that's a good idea?
It's outrageous.
It's like we've gone beyond, I don't know.
It's very hard. You're right though. It's really hard to empathise with. It's really hard to, and it's the same when you look back through any generation, any regime, any authoritarian, when certain people get to they climb to the top whenever things get oppressive, they become the managers, they become the people in charge, and they're the ones who start pushing other people down. And those are I keep talking about it recently, that Viktor Frankl is the Holocaust survivor, and he said, whether it's Nazi guards or fellow prisoners, there are decent people and indecent people in every group. And it seems like those indecent people climb to the top whenever there's an oppressive opportunity or to oppress others. And I think those of us who, I spoke suppose I'm calling us decent people, which might seem a little bit unfair, and biased, but of course it is. But what I mean is people who don't have an urge to oppress others. I can't imagine any scenario under which I'd imagine you or I or most of the listeners would want to humiliate someone like that.
No, I know. I was thinking that because in my nursing, I'd been like a mentor to student nurses, and I was aware that I was almost too sort of lenient. I was always kind of overly caring and be like, "Are you okay?" Like checking in. Like the idea that you turn on someone who was in a more kind of lower down position than you, I could never do that. And I was because my instinct as someone that's interested in psychology is to kind of empathize and try to understand. And I was really struggling to do so. And I think particularly because they were themselves so-called like mental health professionals, I was just thinking, but this is so mad, because how can they not see what they are doing? They're supposed to be the experts of this stuff, and they've sort of become the thing that we're trying to kind of understand. It was like, it was it was so crazy. So yeah, and it went on and on. So I'd been seeing a patient as part of my clinical work, and I was doing really well throughout the whole thing. My kind of work with patients was great and fine, and I saw a patient for 18 months, and we got to the end, and that's part of the training, and I did well. And then I started seeing another patient, and I'd got through all the lectures and seminars, and I was just about to finish the course and seeing this final patient. I should say I'd repeatedly told HR that this particular course lead who wrote the speech about me, that I didn't want contact with her, that I didn't want her to email me directly, and HR kept giving me reassurance that that she'd been told not to contact me, but she kept doing so. She kept putting she put messages on social media, like she just put strange messages with dots on it. She sent text messages to my WhatsApp with just with dots on it. Yeah,
she's a stalker.
It felt really invasive. She sent me these messages on WhatsApp with dots on it, and then like a minute later, I got these phone calls that when I answered, there's just somebody breathing down the line.
This is mad. I didn't expect this turn of events.
No, I know.
Wow.
She actually attempted to video call me late one Sunday evening, and I didn't answer.
Baby reindeer.
Yeah, but this had happened after HR had told her not to contact me.
Wow.
So I was like, it's inappropriate anyway for like a professor to do, like someone at a university to do this. But given that you know that there's an issue and you know that HR have told you not to, I was like, this is now entering a new kind of realm. This has now gone from like a weird dogma to like this person's
obsession.
Yeah, it was so strange, and I was just like, what's going on? And then I started this new work with this patient, and part of psychotherapy training is that you see a supervisor who you talk through your work with your patient with. My supervisor went on leave, so I had to be given a new supervisor. And this course lead who'd sent me these messages wrote to me saying, "Oh, you're going to have one-to-one supervision with me." And I was like, okay, you're harassing me. I've made complaints about your harassment. I'm in the process of suing you because of your victimization and bullying of me. This probably isn't appropriate. So I wrote directly to the CEO of the Tavistock at that point, because I was just like, I don't trust any of the management. So the CEO at the time was Paul Jenkins, who was the head when all of this gender identity stuff was going on as well. And I said, look, this person's been harassing me. You know, I've made multiple complaints about her bullying of me. I'm pursuing a legal case against her. It would seem inappropriate for me to have one-to-one supervision with her. He got back to me quite quickly and said, yeah, it was an error on our part for you to have supervision with her, and we'll agree for you to have a different supervisor. She continued to send me Zoom links to have a supervision with her, and I was just like, I just didn't respond. I was like, okay, wow, this is weird. Then I got pulled into a meeting with the director of the clinic, who put pressure on me to have supervision with the supervisor who has been bullying me, even though the CEO had said I shouldn't be having supervision with her. So I was telling this person that, look, I'm being harassed by her. They didn't care. They just said, well, you either have supervision with her or nothing. And I said, well, I'm being harassed, and the CEO said that I shouldn't have supervision with her, so I'm not going to. That was then used against me as a reason as to why because I didn't seek supervision. They kept saying I wasn't a very good psychotherapist because I didn't attend her supervision sessions. And I was like, no, I've emailed this and I've messaged this. So, and then the final straw was what they used against me finally to push me off the course was towards the end of my psychotherapy with the first patient. there was a loud noise happening outside during one of my therapy sessions, and the patient asked if I could stop the noise. And I left the room briefly, and I knocked on the door where the noise was happening, and I asked if there was like a banging noise going on, and I just said, can you lower the noise? I didn't know what was going on. It turned out there was a child in there playing with like bricks, and they were throwing them.
Oh.
Yeah. So I said, can you lower the noise because of my patient? And then I went back into the room. They then said that in doing that, I'd acted unprofessionally and I'd traumatized the people in the room by knocking on the door. And I said, how could that conceivably be seen as trauma? And they said, well, that it was a therapy session with a child and you traumatized them. And I said, well, I just knocked on the door and asked if the noise could be lowered, because I wasn't aware that this would be happening. And they said that you traumatized the people in the room because they could see you again, and the sight of you again could cause trauma, re-traumatize them. They were saying I wasn't allowed to be in the reception area of the clinic because the sight of my face could re-traumatize the people in the room. So they moved me into the basement where nobody could see me because I was so traumatizing. So I was seeing my patients in the basement and I wasn't allowed to go into the reception area. And then eventually what they said was that this was after 3 weeks after I knocked on the door, they decided that I was unsafe to see patients and they stopped all of my clinical work. They said that there would be an investigation. This was 2 years ago. They said that there would be an investigation to determine whether I was safe to see patients or not. To this day, that investigation never happened. And that's my story. That's my cancellation story.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It's this Kafkaesque, strange thing where you're trying to go higher and higher to see where's there going to be a sane person in this place.
Yeah.
I can't believe it. And you know what? Even after years of looking into this, and I'm sure you might be the same, and I'm sure people listening are as well, when you see someone who's like a high up professional of something and you think like, well, maybe this person will understand. And then you start talking to them and it's flabbergasting how little understanding they have, how little empathy for people with different ideas than theirs. Last night there was like a 60-year-old French professor of philosophy, and we got talking, and I just mentioned that I'd heard Imane Khelif, the Olympic boxer, is a man because he is a man because and she said, why do you think that? And I said, well, because I had a developmental biologist come on from the University of Manchester who explained it to me for an hour that there's just no doubt, and we know that there was all the different bits and pieces, and she got very angry and started saying like, look, just because you have you don't like what trans people are doing and you've got a bit of a phobia and you find it disgusting doesn't. And I said, where are you getting these things from? I haven't said any of those things. I don't find any of it disgusting. I don't care that people can have their things. None of that. I just said this person's a man. Why do you think that she's a woman? And she said, because she's French. She said, because I'm French, I know more about this, and that's it. And that's all she could. And I thought, this is a 60-year-old philosophy professor at the Sorbonne.
Wow.
Who is teaching the minds of our day, the great minds of the future, and doesn't seem to have the reasoning, so isn't able to keep her emotions under control. And those are the kinds of people you were coming up against. And I do wonder if the people who move up, I mean, they have to be overwhelmingly box tickers to get to those places. That's why you were stopped, because you're not a box ticker. You think outside of the box and you actually question things.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I kept, every time I kept writing to them, even to the CEO, they would just sort of say, we are an anti-racist organisation. That was their kind of, they weren't interested in dialogue. And I think maybe I was a bit naive. I mean, I was very aware of kind of like the dark side of human nature. It wasn't, but I sort of thought somebody at some stage would meet me in the middle, or at least meet me halfway and be like, okay, you're entitled to your view. But that just, it never happened. And I'm still shocked by that, you're just genuinely trying to have a conversation. You're just sort of saying like, isn't there a problem with this? And isn't it good that I'm raising this? Like, isn't it good? Wouldn't you want someone to point out that maybe there's something wrong with your ideas, or maybe we should be aware that people don't agree with it? Like, aren't I just helping like the organisation or the institution to think differently? But no, it was all the way through. They just doubled down. And it has affected my sort of trust in people. I'm still kind of getting over it a bit, because I did feel like very disappointed in humanity. I was just like, wow, this is so shocking. And you do sort of think that the higher up you go in an organisation, the more you would meet somebody that's smart and will see what's going on and will intervene. But it doesn't happen.
They hide behind a thought-terminating cliche, which, in Scientology, you would just say suppressive person. So you don't have to think about it. If you say to a Scientologist, oh, but Lord Xenu's not real, they don't have to think about whether there's evidence for Lord Xenu. They just go, suppressive person, you're a suppressive person. So they say, we're an anti-racist organisation. They don't have to think anymore.
No, I know.
We've got that thought-terminating cliche. That's all they need.
Yeah.
Were people there also quite heavy on the pronouns and the Palestine flags?
Not that Palestine thing hadn't happened yet when I was there.
Yeah.
But there was one lecture I went to that was about heteronormativity. It was kind of a mandatory lecture, and the gender stuff was coming up, and it was about, what you're assigned at birth and all of that kind of thing. And then they were linking that back to whiteness, that gender is white. Yeah, it's like this. Everything gets it's like a Venn diagram. They see it. Everything links into. They were saying that psychoanalysis and psychology are kind of they're all white theories. And even during that, I said, well, what do you mean by that? What's a white theory? And they said that. They later said that I attacked them by saying that. But within the gender stuff, this is when stuff was coming into the press about Keira Bell and what was happening to the Gender Identity Service. And I got an email actually at one point, because this is when there was a media storm around it, from the CEO, and he was this was kind of addressed to everyone, saying that we're aware that all the gender identity clinics in the news, and there's rumors about it being shut down. And the whole theme of the email was saying, well, we need to be supportive of all the staff at the Gender Identity Clinic. We need to be aware of the effect that this might be having on them. And there was no kind of reference to kind of Keira Bell or patients or the other side of the argument. It was like the media is, doing this to us. And they were saying, well, the media's lying about us. And, we need to support all our colleagues at this point with regards to the way the media are representing this issue.
They sound kooky.
So even at that stage, and this was being discussed in Parliament at that time, and you just think, wow, I sort of would look at them and think, I wish I had your kind of confidence. Like, I wish if somebody in Parliament, like an MP, it gotten to that level, was saying that I was in the wrong, that my institution was in the wrong, I'd think, I probably ought to look at this. Maybe I am wrong. If it's gotten to the level of the national news and the health secretary is saying there's a problem, that this has become too ideological, I'm not that delusional that I would have to think, maybe I've got this wrong. But even then they were like, no, it's the Tories, it's the media. And I was just like, well, where do you go? You got to the point where you have to sort of resign to the fact that you can't talk to these people. You can't have a conversation, you can't get through to them. And that's what I found so hard, because so much of my job in therapy is like trying to talk to someone and trying to get them to see, a different view. But with this, it was particularly with trans and critical race theory, they just didn't want to. And that's what I found so extraordinary and disappointing. And
I can see how it happens though, because it's quite. When I studied English literature, and I remember we were taught very much. Everybody is taught, and I think it's not just English; it's all the different courses you do. You're taught to disregard or value truth less, and instead to value arguments and winning arguments, and just being right despite truth. And so, if an author has written about a red tractor, it's quite fun as a student to go, oh, so the red tractor symbolizes communism or anger or whatever the red thing is. Anything but the truth, which was probably that the author just had a red tractor when he was young, or he just saw a red tractor and he wrote about that. But they're not interested in whether it's true or not. They say the death of the author. That's Roland Barthes' theory. So I can see how that starts. So then you're like, okay, well, I'm finished of all these years. I got a first in whatever it was. I'm the best at my class. Now I'm very good to go into politics, media, mental health, all of those different kinds of things. And you start with this exciting theory of like, okay, white people are bad. People can change sex. And then it's quite fun to start inventing like, okay, how can we link all of that together and show how these people are the evil ones? It's just like you're analyzing literature. So I see why they do it.
That's what it felt like. Because I did a degree in English literature, and it felt like, you know, in the same way that you analyze a text, and as you say, you read things into things which the author may not necessarily thought. They were doing that, but they were doing that to people. They were doing that to patients, and they were potentially going to then go on to work in the NHS. And I was thinking, you're doing like a Marxist analysis or critical theory analysis of a person. Like, that's a very different thing to doing it to a text. You can go at it with a text, because who cares? You can write what you want about it. But when you're sort of saying, oh, I know what's going on in this person's mind based on this, this and this, and they sort of felt that they were like experts in that. They've got the qualification. They can see what's going on in a way that other people can't. And it's like, no, do you not see that you're now operating on this almost like divine revelation, that you can see things that aren't there?
So like a young girl who says she feels a bit boyish, and so they know, oh, but it's because you're in the wrong body. We can see this.
Yeah, they can see it. They just see themselves as the experts of like subjectivity and emotions, which means there's no guardrails on it. Like, you can just go off in any direction, and what you think and feel is the truth because you're the expert and you decide. And that's where it had gone. I mean, you know, psychoanalysis and psychotherapy is kind of prone to that anyway, but then when you add in all of this critical race theory and ideology, it just becomes so mad. And that's the story of the Tavistock, really.
You mentioned Keira Bell. I interviewed her yesterday, actually.
Oh, wow.
So that was great. What a lovely person.
Yeah.
Lovely woman she is.
Yeah.
Who now, for those who don't know, has a low voice and facial hair because of changes that they sort of encouraged her to do, and she now regrets. But for those who haven't heard that one or anything, is that all in like the same building as where you were?
Yeah. So there's the Tavistock. It's by Swiss Cottage. So there's two buildings. I was at the Portman Clinic, and there's the Tavistock Clinic. But they're all they're all next to door to each other. There was at the Tavistock Clinic, there was kind of the floor where they did talking therapy, and then the floor above where they had the gender identity service. And it was just remarkable that, to me, those two things were totally opposed to each other. Either we think that problems are in the psyche, in which case the response is to help the person out by, you know, changing their thinking or changing the way they feel or changing their perspective, or we think the problem's with the body, in which case, you know, it doesn't matter what they say. But you had these two floors next to each other, and I was thinking, do they not see the contradiction here? But the whole way through my training, the gender thing, as I said, it was coming out in the media when I was there. It was just not talked about.
Wow.
And I was just thinking, and then there was the legal case of Sonia Appleby, and the result of that she was seen to have been discriminated against because she was a whistleblower, and that was in the news, and it wasn't talked about at all. And I was thinking, hang on, our profession is all about talking about things and being open and not kind of repressing, you know, not ignoring things. And yet this huge thing that was happening in the media and even being spoken about in Parliament, that was like, we don't talk about that. And I was thinking, but this is really unhealthy. This is really weird that we wouldn't talk about it. And I was like, can you not see that you're repressing something like massively, you know, on a huge scale, that as therapists we should, you know, talk about? It was all about, well, we need to talk about this, but on this occasion, oh no, we don't talk about that. And I just thought and that's why I just sort of thought this whole thing is just a scam, really, isn't it? Because none of you are actually interested in truth. None of you are actually interested in genuinely being open-minded. Because if you were, you would say, well, this is, you know, we need to think about this. This is you know, have we gone wrong as an institution? But they didn't. And that was, yeah.
When I was investigating an exorcist in Argentina, and it was the same demographic of young girls who had the same issues that go through trans, he used therapy as a way to legitimize what he was doing.
Yeah.
So he would say, and I don't know which way around it was, but it was mad, because I said, well, what if it's schizophrenia someone has, and because they're hearing voices? And he said, well, if the voices come from inside the head, it's schizophrenia, and if they come from outside, it's the devil, or the other way around. I'm not sure which way. And basically, it's a way of legitimizing. It's him saying, hey, I know there are people with mental health issues, but sometimes we need to exercise them. And I feel like with Tavistock, they've started from it's the same kind of ideological belief. And by the way, I'm not attacking Christianity. This particular exorcist who was a fraud. But it's the same thing of we're starting with we want to change people into different bodies because this is quite fun, and Dr. Moreau's island of whatever, this is fun, we're going to do that, but we need to legitimize it. Let's put it in an NHS Tavistock clinic next to all the other therapy stuff, even though we're not really doing any therapy. We're just saying, we'll put you in a different body.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, when everything's subjective all the way down, you very quickly end up at tyranny, because they are just saying our interpretations are correct. So even when I was raising complaints, the course leader was having digs at me about she was making comments about people that raise complaints do so out of narcissism, and they do it to get attention and all of this sort of thing.
Suppressive person.
Yeah. So anything that you do gets pathologized, but anything they do is never pathologized. And that's the problem. So it ends up just being all about power, because when you don't have the outside reference point of reality, of evidence, then it is just power all the way down. And the irony is that they were seeing themselves as kind of critiques of, like, giving critiques of power, that they were cynical about power, and that's kind of what critical theory is like they're being aware of who's oppressed and who's oppressing who, and all of that sort of thing, and they want to lift up the people that are oppressed, and they want to be aware of the oppression. But they are the oppressors in a really genuine way. They are the people that want to hound people of courses. They're the people that want to bully people. They're the people that want to tell people what to do. So to me, they were always talking about themselves when they were going on about all of this stuff. It's like, I'm not that, interested in power, but they were like obsessed with it. And it was like, maybe that's because it's what you're doing, and
we've seen that in history so many times.
Yeah.
Gosh. Yeah. Do you think, as a Christian, then, do you give much credence to this concept going around at the moment that the fall in Christianity is partly responsible for, or Christianity is being replaced by this kind of wokeness?
It's interesting, yeah. I possibly partly. It is definitely. I mean, what I saw from, and they all bought into the COVID stuff as well. I mean, that's just an aside. But what I saw from the way they approached critical race theory and gender ideology was that what it gave them was a sense of security, a sense of certainty. They now knew who the goodies and the baddies were. They now had the moral high ground. They now understood how the whole world works. They can look at any situation and work out what's going on in a person's mind and who's oppressing who. And then you feel like you've got all the knowledge. So it's a way, to me, it's a way of managing anxiety and I actually think of unhappiness. To me, I think ideology is like a con. It's like if a con man knocks on your door and says, look, I've got this potion or this drink that you can drink, and it will give you certainty. You'll be able to understand the world. You'll know who's good and who's bad. You'll be moral all the time. You'll be righteous. All you have to do is sign up to my subscription, just take the potion, meet with me and pay me, and you won't be lonely anymore, and you'll have a community. If you're kind of happy in your life and you like your life, maybe your life's a bit messy, but you have good relationships, you have interests, generally things are going okay, you'll be like, this is a bit dodgy. No, I don't want that, thank you, I'm all right actually. But if you're vulnerable, if you're someone that is lonely and you're unhappy and you feel like the world is catastrophic and you don't know what's going on, you will buy into that. And to me, religion was it was a much healthier version of a place where you can go away, you can put things into perspective, you can believe in things on a higher level, you can think outside that you can put things, as I say, you can put things into perspective, you can be with other people, you can have a community, but it was kind of genuine. It was like a genuine community. It was a kind of a genuine spiritual belief. But ideology, to me, it's like a perverse version of that. It's like it doesn't keep itself in check, and it very quickly becomes all about power. And like Christianity's been through a reformation. It's had like 2,000 years of theologians thinking about it and discussing it. Like, it knows its own problems. It's sort of had time to work itself out so that it doesn't go into these strange extremes, although occasionally it does. But now we know what kind of religious extremism looks like, and we know what kind of more moderate religion looks like. But woke hasn't been through that yet. So very quickly people think, gosh, this is so exciting. They get this rush of, wow, now now I'm morally pure, now I know everything. And they don't realize that they've become like the religious extremists. They don't see it. And that's where I think that argument does hold a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's with your court case, I mean, I would have thought this is going to be open and shut, but then Maya Forstater, for her gender discrimination, she lost originally, and then had to appeal.
Yeah.
I know it's a different country, but the Roxy Tickle case with Sal Grover, unbelievably, Roxy Tickle with the porn star name won that case and gets to be in a women's app. What happens next with your court case? I know you said you're crowdfunding.
I'm crowdfunding, yeah. So this case it's not in the employment tribunal because it was a training course, not an employment tribunal. It's in the county court, so it's a lot more serious in terms of if I lose, I will lose a lot of money. So it's put me in quite a risky position. Wow. So it was always quite a bold thing to do. Yeah. So I've had to live with it for a long time. But I mean, it seems I've got a good legal team. I don't know whether we haven't got to the point of kind of settlement negotiations or whether it will go to trial yet. I suspect it will go to trial probably in over a year's time. These things are incredibly long.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's been going on. It's been a huge part of my life now for many years. I never realised how long the process would be, but it probably will be a year or so if it goes to trial. I mean, my lawyers are telling me that they're quite confident, and I've been told that it's got a good prospect of success. But I guess I always worry because ultimately it's a judge that decides, and as you were saying, judges are human, and the world's becoming more and more politicized, and unfortunately even the legal system's becoming more and more woke and activist. So it's really hard. You can never be, you just don't know. So it's I live with it every day, really, and the uncertainty, and
we're all behind you. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
100%. I can't wait. I wish it was sooner.
Yeah.
And we can jump behind that. How can people support you?
Yeah, so my crowdfund is on GoFundMe. So it's GoFundMe/StandUpToWoke. And I'm on Twitter at StandUpToWoke as well. So you can find, if you just Google Amy Gallagher, you should be able to find me. But I do want to say, if there's anybody watching that has donated, and there's lots of information about my legal case on the crowdfund as well, but thank you so much, because there's no way I could have got this far without the donations. Like, I do think crowdfunding is amazing. Like, it has meant that ordinary people can stand up and do something in the way that they couldn't before, because I'd never even met a lawyer before this case. Like, I was like, whoa, I was terrified. I was like nervous about speaking to a lawyer on the phone in the first instance. Now I talk to them all the time. But GoFundMe/StandUpToWoke. Yeah,
I hope people do support that. And
thank you.
Last, I mean, who is a heretic you admire?
Well, you mentioned her actually already. Keira Bell. Keira Bell is I cannot, all the way through this legal case, like, what's happened to me, I've lost my career and it was extremely stressful. But compared to what's happened to what people call detransitioners, I know some of them don't always like that term, but you know what I mean?
Sure.
Is, to me, that really put things into perspective, because I was getting so stressed and down, and I was thinking, God, there's people that have had their bodies destroyed by this institution, and she took them all the way to, the High Court and the Court of Appeal, and all the way they fought against her. And I was just like, how can somebody who's gone through this hell at the hands of an institution, had their body destroyed, and yet they're able to fight this, even knowing that the institution is now fighting against them? Like, I can't believe that. I can't believe that there was no sort of like, oh my gosh, we're so sorry, that's awful. It's like, no, we're in the right. We were right to, mutilate your body and give you puberty blockers, and we're going to fight you all the way. The level of courage and bravery that Keira Bell and other transitions, I know you've had Richie Herron on the show, people like that, to me, that it's amazing that they can do that. And I think we're living in times where people are very cowardly and people aren't saying anything. But when you look at people like Keira Bell or Richie Herron, you just see like the extremes of like human bravery, I think. So I think Keira Bell really is an amazing heretic of our time. And I'd like, eventually, if this madness is over at some point, I'd like to see maybe a statue of her or a portrait of her in the National Portrait Gallery or something like that. I don't know if we'll ever get to there, but she changed everything. What she did, I really think that, and yeah, I can't believe what she did. I think it's amazing.
They'll pull that statue down 50 years later when they're woke again. So that's the first thought I had when I imagined the statue. It's just people pulling it down to the river in Bristol. Yeah,
she said something wrong on Twitter. Pull it down.
Something like that. Did you know she was actually... Oh, I can't be bothered with it. Well, thank you. And people, please go to Stand Up to Woke on X, and we'll put the crowdfunder down below. It's such an important thing. So please do help Amy. She's been wonderful. Hit the like button here and keep watching this channel.